The wind howled like a forsaken lover, carving ghosts from the endless white veil of the storm. Lissa Vale staggered through the blizzard's merciless embrace, her boots sinking into drifts that clawed at her ankles like vengeful spirits. The cold was a living thing, seeping through the frayed edges of her woolen cloak, numbing her fingers until they felt like brittle twigs ready to snap. She had been banished at dawn, cast out from the Iron Fang Pack's shadowed halls with nothing but the clothes on her back and a single damning accusation echoing in her ears: traitor. The words of the Beta enforcers still burned hotter than the frostbite creeping up her legs. You conspired with the Shadow Wolves, Omega. Your scent betrays you. Lies, all of it, woven from the jealousy of a rival who coveted her place at the healer's hearth. But truth held no weight against the Pack's fear of war, and so they had stripped her of her mark, the silver locket that once hung warm against her chest, symbol of her bond to the Pack's ancient lunar rites. Now, it was gone, smashed beneath the Alpha's boot, its shards lost to the mud of the exile grounds. The mountains loomed like jagged teeth against the bruised sky, their peaks vanishing into the swirling gray. Lissa's breath came in ragged gasps, each one a silver plume that the gale tore away before it could rise. She was no warrior, no fierce she-wolf born to conquer the wilds. She was an Omega, her strength woven into quiet arts, herbs that mended flesh, chants that soothed fevered dreams. Yet here, in this frozen purgatory, those gifts felt as useless as the empty satchel slung over her shoulder. The storm had risen not long after the Pack's gate slammed shut behind her, as if the Deusa herself mourned the injustice, or perhaps punished her for some unseen sin. Snow lashed her face, stinging like 1,000 tiny accusations, and she wiped it away with a trembling hand. Tasting salt on her lips, tears, or blood from cracked skin, she could no longer tell. In the distance, the Pack's howls faded into the wind's roar, a chorus of rejection that twisted her gut. She had served them faithfully, binding wounds after border skirmishes, whispering prayers under the full moon to guide the hunters home. But whispers of her unnatural affinity for the old ways, the way shadows seemed to listen when she called, had festered into suspicion. And now, with the rival Stormclaw Pack encroaching from the eastern ridges, paranoia had claimed her as its first sacrifice. "Leave and never return," the Alpha had growled, his eyes cold as the iron collar they had forced her to wear until the bond broke, searing her neck with phantom fire even now. The pain lingered, a raw cicatrice beneath her collar, but it was the emptiness inside that truly wounded her, the hollow ache where Pack loyalty once bloomed. Lissa paused at the edge of a ravine, the wind shoving her toward its yawning maw. Below, the river churned black and furious, half-frozen, its surface a mosaic of ice shards that gleamed like broken promises under the storm's dim light. She could end it here, let the fall claim her, spare herself the slow death of exposure. The thought tempted, a siren's call amid the isolation. What was strength, if not the mercy of surrender? But something stirred in her blood, a faint pulse like the distant thrum of wolf song, urging her onward. The Deusa's light, perhaps, or mere delusion born of desperation. She clutched the remnants of her cloak tighter, the fabric threadbare and scented with the faint, acrid tang of smoke from the Pack's hearths, a ghost of warmth she would never feel again. Hours blurred into an eternity of white torment. The storm intensified, visibility shrinking to arm's length. The world reduced to the crunch of snow underfoot and the relentless whistle in her ears. Her vision blurred, not just from the gale, but from exhaustion, her legs buckling more often now. She collapsed against a boulder, its surface slick and unyielding, and curled into herself, the cold seeping into her bones like regret. Memories flickered unbidden. The Alpha's mate, Ilara, with her sharp smiles and sharper ambitions, planting the seeds of doubt. "An Omega with secrets is a danger to us all," she had murmured in counsel, her voice honey over venom. Lisa had seen the flicker of triumph in her eyes as the verdict fell. Betrayal's blade cut deepest from within. As night deepened, the moon struggled to pierce the clouds, casting a pallid glow that turned the snow to silver ash. Lisa's fingers, blue-tinged and unresponsive, fumbled at her throat, tracing the invisible scar where the locket had hung. It had been more than jewelry, a relic from her mother, etched with the crescent moon and a single drop of blood-red enamel, said to hold the essence of the first Omega who tamed the wild alphas with her compassion. "Wear it always," her mother had whispered on her deathbed, "and remember, rejection is but the forge for rebirth." Now, without it, Lisa felt unmoored, adrift in a sea of ice. The wind carried faint echoes, weavos distant, perhaps hunters or beasts, but they twisted into illusions, luring her toward phantom safety. She rose once more, driven by a stubborn spark she could not name, and pressed on into the heart of the tempest. The storm's fury seemed to mock her solitude, whipping flakes into her eyes until tears froze on her lashes. Death hovered close, a shadow at her shoulder, patient and inevitable. Yet in that moment, as her strength ebbed to whispers, a distant thunder rumbled, not from the sky, but from the earth itself. Hooves, pounding like war drums through the gale. Lissa froze, heart slamming against her ribs, the sound cutting through the wind's lament. Friend or foe? Salvation or the pack's final judgment? She sank to her knees in the snow, the cold embracing her like an old betrayer, and waited for whatever fate the night would deliver. The thunder of hooves grew into a tempest of its own, shattering the storm's monotonous wail like a blade through silk. Lissa lifted her head from the snow's cruel cradle, her vision a haze of white and shadow, but the sound anchored her, pulling her from the brink of surrender. Fear coiled in her chest, sharp as the wind's teeth. Pursuers from the pack come to ensure her exile ended in blood? Or something wilder, born of the mountain's unforgiving heart? She tried to rise, but her limbs betrayed her, heavy as forged iron, and she remained kneeling, a fragile silhouette against the blizzard's fury. The riders burst from the swirling veil like specters summoned from the Deusa's wrath. 3 wolves in furred cloaks, their mounts steaming plumes of breath into the gale. At their fore rode a figure that commanded the storm itself to yield, tall, broad-shouldered, his black stallion rearing against the wind as if defying the gods. Alpha King Kalen Drake, though Lissa did not yet know his name, only the aura that radiated from him like heat from a hidden forge. His armor gleamed dully under a mantle of midnight wool, edged in silver that caught the moon's frail light, and his eyes, storm-gray and piercing, scanned the wastes with a predator's unerring focus. Blood streaked his gauntlet, not his own, but from the skirmish that had delayed him. A traitor's ambush on the ridge, whispers of Stormclaw spies testing the Iron Fang borders. Guilt gnawed at him already, a familiar shadow, for he had signed her banishment in haste, swayed by council lies, while his mind wrestled with the weight of impending war. His gaze locked on her, and time fractured. Lissa felt it, a pull, instinctive and ancient, like the tide answering the moon's call. Her Omega blood stirred, whispering of mates and bonds long forbidden, but she crushed it down, fear blooming hotter than any recognition. Who was this king of the wilds, riding through hell for a forsaken like her? Curiosity flickered amid the terror, a spark in the void. His scent cut through the storm's metallic bite, rich with pine smoke and iron resolve, laced with the faint coppery tang of fresh blood. He dismounted in a fluid motion, boots crunching into the drift beside her, and knelt, his presence a wall against the wind. "You," he growled, voice low and rough as gravel under claws, tempered by a melancholy that softened its edge. His hand, gloved, scarred, reached for her shoulder, steadying her as she recoiled. Up close, the lines of his face told stories of battles won and oaths broken, a faint scar tracing his jaw, silvered by years, and eyes haunted by the ghosts of fallen packs. Kaelin had learned the truth too late. A rider from the healer's kin slipping through the gates at dusk with a sealed missive. Ilara's jealousy, not conspiracy, had doomed her. The king's guilt was a blade in his gut, twisting deeper now as he saw the ruin of her. Lips blue, cloak torn, the raw mark at her throat where the bond had been severed. He had ridden without pause, outpacing his guard, driven by a duty that felt like redemption's fragile thread. Lysa's breath hitched, her body trembling not just from cold, but from the proximity, the way his warmth seeped through her like forbidden fire. "Stay back," she whispered, voice cracking like thin ice, denial surging as instinct urged her closer. Fear won. He was alpha through and through, a king whose word could shatter worlds. And she was nothing now, exile, traitor in their eyes. Yet curiosity held her gaze to his, searching the gray depths for intent. Was this mercy, or the pack's final cruelty, cloaked in rescue? The silver locket's memory burned in her mind, its shattered crescent, a symbol of bonds broken. She touched her throat instinctively, feeling the phantom weight, as if it judged this moment. Kaelin ignored her protest, shrugging off his mantle to drape it over her shoulders. The fabric was heavy, scented with his essence, leather, sweat, and the faint musk of wolf fur, enveloping her in a cocoon that chased the chill's fingers from her skin. "No more wandering alone," he said, the words a vow etched in the wind's howl. His guards circled, eyes sharp for threats, but he lifted her effortlessly into his arms, her slight form cradled against the unyielding plane of his chest. She stiffened, heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his, the connection igniting like embers in dry tinder, instinctive, undeniable. Yet she rationalized it as survival's lie. He was savior or captor. She would not yield to the pull, not when rejection's wound still bled. As his stallion bore them through the storm, the world blurred into motion, snow whipping past like vengeful spirits, the moon breaking through clouds to silver the path ahead. Lissa's head lolled against his shoulder, exhaustion claiming her, despite the war within. His heartbeat thrummed steady beneath her ear, a counterpoint to the distant weavos that echoed from the peaks. Stormclaw challengers, perhaps, or the Iron Fang's distant call. Kaelin urged the horse onward, his jaw set, guilt forging resolve. He would not let her fall to the wilds. But as her fingers brushed the bloodied edge of his gauntlet, smearing crimson on her skin, she felt the symbol stir anew. The locket's blood-red drop now mirrored in this shared stain. Connection born of fear and curiosity, denied yet blooming in the storm's heart. They crested a ridge as the gale began to wane, revealing a hidden hollow where pines bowed under snow's weight, a fleeting refuge from the night's teeth. Kaelin dismounted, carrying her to a sheltered cleft, his guards kindling a fire that spat defiance at the cold. Flames danced, casting golden flickers on his face, illuminating the melancholy etched there, the king who bore his pack's sins like a crown of thorns. Lisa watched him through half-lidded eyes, the pull warring with her walls, as warmth seeped into her veins like a promise unspoken. And now, I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel, and at what moments of the night they find you. The fire's tentative glow pushed back the night's encroaching shadows, its flames licking at the air like hesitant tongues tasting the cold. Lisa huddled closer to the blaze in the cleft of the hollow, the rough stone wall at her back a poor substitute for the pack's sturdy hearths she had once known. Kaelin's mantle still draped her shoulders, heavy with his scent, pine resin and the sharp bite of exertion that wrapped around her like an unwelcome tether, stirring instincts she dared not name. The warmth seeped into her chilled flesh, thawing the numbness in her fingers, but it could not touch the deeper frost of betrayal lodged in her chest. She watched him through the flickering light, his broad frame silhouetted as he tended the flames, adding twisted branches that snapped and hissed in protest. His guards had melted into the perimeter, their forms ghosts among the snow-laden pines, vigilant against the howls that threaded the wind. Distant now, but laced with menace, as if the mountains themselves conspired. Kaelin moved with a deliberate grace, his scarred hands coaxing the fire higher until it roared softly, casting rivers of gold across the snow-dusted ground. Up close, in this fragile sanctuary, the king's melancholy was palpable, a weight that bowed his shoulders ever so slightly beneath the armor's unyielding gleam. Lissa traced the line of his jaw with her gaze, noting the faint scar that silvered there, a relic of some long-ago battle that had carved more than flesh. Guilt shadowed his eyes, storm-gray depths that flickered with unspoken remorse each time they met hers. He had not spoken of the ride, of the truth that had spurred him through the storm, but she felt it in the careful way he avoided her throat, where the invisible cicatrice burned like a fresh brand. The locket's absence ached there, its shattered form a ghost between them. The crescent moon and that single drop of blood-red enamel, symbol of compassion's quiet power, now reduced to memory. Yet as embers danced, she wondered if this stranger's arrival was the Deusa's cruel jest, offering rescue only to deepen the wound of isolation. A low growl rumbled from the tree line, shattering the hollow's fragile peace. Lisa's heart lurched, her body coiling instinctively as shadows detached from the pines. 3 figures, cloaked in ragged furs, their eyes gleaming yellow in the firelight. Stormclaw scouts, she knew it in her bones. Their scents carried the musky tang of eastern ridges, intruders probing the borders like wolves testing a weakened flank. One snarled, baring fangs that caught the moon's pallid gleam breaking through the clouds, while the others flanked, knives drawn, their breath steaming like accusations in the chill air. Panic surged through Lysa, hot and visceral, her mind flashing to the pack's accusations, traitor, conspirator, now twisted into this nightmare pursuit. Had Alara's lies reached even here, painting her as bait for greater betrayals? Kaelin was before her in an instant, his body a shield of steel and resolve, drawing his broadsword with a whisper of metal on leather. "Stay behind me," he commanded, voice a low thunder that brooked no argument, yet laced with that underlying sorrow, as if protecting her was both atonement and burden. The first scout lunged, a blur of claws and fury, but Kaelin met him mid-stride, blade clashing against bone with a crack that echoed off the rocks. Blood sprayed, dark and arterial, splattering the snow in crimson blooms that steamed against the white. Lissa's breath caught, the metallic scent flooding her senses, mingling with the fire's smoke and evoking the locket's lost emblem. That eternal drop of blood, binding healer to wounded. She pressed back against the stone, fear rooting her, but curiosity, damnable, insistent, held her eyes on him. This king fought not with rage's blind fury, but with a measured ethic, sparing a killing blow where mercy might turn the tide. His strikes precise, defending rather than destroying. The second assailant circled, feinting toward Lissa, his gaze locking on her with predatory hunger. She scrambled for a branch, splintered from the fire's edge, her hands trembling as she gripped it like a talisman. The cold bit into her palms anew, but adrenaline surged, a spark of the Omega's quiet strength she had thought exiled with her. The scout lunged, and she swung wildly, the wood connecting with a thud that stunned him back. In that breath, Kaelin was there, his free hand shoving the foe into the snow, boot pinning the throat until the fight ebbed. "Yield!" he growled, the word heavy with the weight of his own past judgments, the hasty banishment, the council's deceptions that had cost her everything. The scout spat defiance, but his companions faltered, dragging him into retreat as howls split the night, calling them to deeper shadows. The guards pursued, their forms vanishing into the storm's remnants, leaving the hollow echoing with the wind's mournful sigh. Panting, Kalen sheathed his sword, turning to her with blood-streaked gauntlets that mirrored the locket's phantom stain. He knelt, close enough that she felt the heat radiating from him, a counterpoint to the fire's dying crackle. "You're safe," he murmured, his voice softening, the melancholy cracking like thin ice to reveal the man beneath the crown, ethical, burdened, seeking redemption in this act of shelter. Lysa's pulse thrummed, the instinctive pull tightening like a vine around her ribs, born now not just of fear, but of shared peril. She had seen him fight for her, not as a possession to claim, but as a soul wronged by the same webs of politics and betrayal that ensnared them both. Empathy bloomed unbidden, warming the hollow in her chest where rejection had festered. His guilt was a mirror to her pain, two exiles forging alliance in blood and flame. Yet she resisted, rationalizing the bond as survival's illusion, her hand rising to ward him off even as curiosity drew her gaze to his. "Why?" she whispered, voice raw from the cold and the night's violence, the word carrying the weight of her shattered trust. Why ride for an Omega cast aside? Why shield her when his own pack's shadows loomed? The moon hung low now, its silver light pooling in the bloodied snow, illuminating the cicatrice at her throat, as if the Deusa herself traced it with forgiving light. Kalen's eyes held hers, haunted yet resolute, and in that silence, the vinculo stirred, empathy weaving through denial, a thread of tenderness amid the tragedy. He reached out, hesitating, his fingers brushing the edge of her cloak, not to claim, but to offer, a shared fire against the encroaching dark. As the flames settled to embers, the hollow felt less like refuge and more like revelation, the wind carrying faint uivos that spoke of wars yet to come. Lisa leaned back, the mantle's warmth a reluctant embrace, her mind wrestling the dilemma. Was this connection destiny's gift, or another betrayal cloaked in compassion? The blood on the snow gleamed like the locket's lost drop, a symbol binding their wounds, urging her toward acceptance she could not yet yield. Strength, she thought, was not in surrender, but in choosing mercy amid the storm's remnants. What was redemption, if not this fragile trust, born of fire and shared blood under the moon's watchful eye? The embers in the hollow had faded to a sullen red glow, like the dying heart of a wounded beast, casting elongated shadows that danced across the snow-swept stone. Lissa sat wrapped in Kalen's mantle, the fabric's weight a constant reminder of the man who now stood at the cleft's edge, his silhouette etched against the moon's rising arc. The night had deepened, the wind's howl softening to a mournful whisper that carried echoes of the scouts' retreat, uivos fading into the pines like regrets swallowed by the dark. Blood from the skirmish stained the ground in irregular patterns, freezing into crimson crystals that caught the lunar light, mirroring the phantom drop in her lost locket. She traced the scar at her throat absently, the skin tender and raised, a cicatrice that pulsed with the night's residue, fear, gratitude, and that insistent pull she refused to name. Why had he come? The question lingered unspoken now, but its echo thrummed in her veins, mingling with the fire's faint warmth and the metallic tang of spilled blood. Kalen turned from his vigil, his storm-gray eyes finding hers in the dimness, heavy with the melancholy that seemed woven into his very bones. He had stripped off his gauntlets, revealing hands marked by old scars, faded lines from oaths sworn and broken, battles where mercy had cost him dearly. Guilt shadowed him still, a crown heavier than any iron forged in the Iron Fang forges. He had banished her on whispers, blind to Alara's venom, and now the weight of that error pressed like the mountain's unyielding stone. "The storm breaks at dawn," he said quietly, his voice a low rumble that cut through the silence, not a command, but an offering, as if sharing the night's secrets might bridge the chasm between them. He knelt by the fire, adding a final branch that crackled to life, flames leaping to illuminate the lines of exhaustion on his face. Lissa watched him, curiosity warring with the walls she had built, high as the ridges that hemmed this refuge, rationalizing his presence as duty, nothing more. An Alpha King's atonement for a hasty decree, not the instinctive bond that stirred her blood like moonlight on water. Yet as the fire steadied, a deeper chill seeped into the hollow, not from the wind, but from within her, a tremor that began in her core and spread like frost through her limbs. The scar at her throat burned anew, hotter than before, as if the locket's absence had unleashed something long dormant. Visions flickered at the edges of her sight, shadows uncoiling from the pines, not as threats, but as threads, weaving paths through the unseen. She gasped, clutching the mantle tighter, her breath shallow and ragged. The Deuce's light, she thought, delusion, or the old ways her pack had feared. Her affinity for the lunar rites had always been whispered of, a gift from her mother's line, but exile had buried it deep, smothered under layers of rejection and survival's grit. Now, in this fragile sanctuary, it stirred, unbidden and fierce. Kaelin was at her side in an instant, his hand hovering near her arm, concern etching deeper furrows across his brow. "What is it?" he murmured, the ethical core of him demanding he witness her pain without intrusion, his melancholy deepening as if her suffering amplified his own. Lissa shook her head, but the visions sharpened. She saw the iron-fang borders aflame, not from stormclaw blades, but from a curse older than the Pax, a shadow blight that twisted loyalties, turning kin to traitors, as it had nearly done with Alara's lies. It was no mere politics. It was the Deuce's judgment on alphas who ruled without compassion, a darkness that fed on broken bonds, and at its heart, a path, silver-threaded, lunar, leading through the mountains to a temple long forgotten, where blood and moon could cleanse it. Her gift manifested then, the Pathfinder's sight. Eyes that pierced veils, revealing destinies woven in starlight and snow. The scar throbbed, and from her fingertips a faint glow emanated, ethereal and blue as frozen moonlight, tracing symbols in the air, crescents and drops, echoing the locket's form. He recoiled slightly, not in fear but awe, his breath catching as the glow illuminated the hollow, turning the bloodied snow to shimmering rubies. "By the Deusa," he whispered, the words reverent, his gray eyes widening with realization. Kaelin had carried his own curse, unspoken until now, visions that plagued his nights, of a shadow devouring his realm, demanding a key to unlock the Pack's unity, a healer not of flesh, but of fates, an Omega whose rejection forged her into the vessel of redemption. Prophecies from the ancient lunar scrolls, dismissed as myth by war-hardened councils, flooded back. The Pathfinder, born to guide the guilty king through the blight, her blood the antidote to betrayal's poison. Lissa was no mere exile. She was the revelation, the quiet force that could mend the fractures in his soul and his kingdom. Guilt twisted sharper in him, for he had cast out the very light his destiny craved, rationalizing her banishment as necessary for the greater war. Now, seeing her gift bloom amid the embers, he understood. She was his proof, the ethical trial that demanded he choose compassion over power. Lissa pulled back, the glow fading as quickly as it had come, leaving her drained, the weight of it crashing like a wave. "It's nothing," she lied, voice trembling, denial surging as the bond tightened. Instinct urging acceptance, but her heart, scarred by rejection, resisted. What was this power, if it bound her to a king whose world had already forsaken her? The moon watched from above, its light pooling in the bloodied prints at their feet, the locket's symbol reborn in the night's tableau. A drop of red against white, promising healing through shared wounds. Kaelin reached out slowly, his fingers brushing hers, not to seize but to affirm. The touch electric, visceral, a spark of fire in the cold. "It is everything," he said, his voice laced with that profound melancholy, the realization dawning like dawn over the peaks. She was the key, and in her eyes, he saw his own redemption reflected, not as reward, but as the hard-won choice to atone. The hollow fell silent, save for the fire's soft sigh and the distant weavos that heralded greater storms to come. Lissa's mind reeled, introspection coiling like smoke. Strength lay not in the gift's power, but in wielding it freely, beyond the chains of destiny or duty. What was fate, if not the liberty to heal or withhold? The wind stirred the embers, carrying the scent of pine and blood, and in that breath the vinculo deepened, resisted yet inevitable, a tender tragedy unfolding under the Deuce's gaze. Kaelin held her gaze, his ethical resolve shining through the guilt, knowing this revelation bound them, not in chains, but in the fragile poetry of mutual salvation. Subscribe if you believe mercy can crown even the fallen. The moon hung heavy in the velvet sky, a silver sentinel over the hollow's fragile peace, its light tracing the frozen bloodstains like veins of forgotten oaths. Lysa withdrew her hand from Kaelin's grasp, the ethereal glow of her gift lingering as a faint shimmer on her skin, a whisper of the Deuce's touch that both empowered and unnerved her. The scar at her throat throbbed in rhythm with her pulse, the absent locket's memory a hollow ache, its blood-red drop now echoed in the crimson flecks scattered across the snow, a symbol that bound her visions to this king's burdened fate. She felt exposed, raw as the wind-scoured stone at her back, the revelation cracking open the walls she had so carefully rebuilt. This power, the Pathfinder's sight, was no gentle inheritance. It was a call to weave destinies, to guide through shadows that her own pack had branded as heresy. And now, with Kaelin's gray eyes fixed on her, heavy with the weight of prophecy fulfilled, she sensed the inexorable pull tightening, demanding she choose. Step into the light of redemption or flee back into exile's solitary dark. Kaelin rose slowly, his silhouette towering against the fire's dying embers, the melancholy in his posture deepening as if the night's truths had carved fresh scars into his soul. He had always carried the Blight's curse like a shadow crown, visions of rot spreading through the packs, fueled by betrayals that mirrored his own failures. Ilara's deceit had been but a symptom, a venomous bloom in soil tilled by his hasty judgments. Now, Lisa's gift illuminated the path. The forgotten lunar temple, hidden in the eastern crags, where an Omega's blood could purify the darkness, forging unity against the Stormclaw's encroaching war. But awe gave way to resolve in his gaze, tempered by the ethical fire that defined him. "We cannot linger here," he said, voice low and resonant, carrying the gravity of a king who had learned to temper power with compassion. "The scouts will return with their alpha, and the Iron Fang. They will come for you or for me, demanding answers." His words hung in the chill air, stirring the pines with a faint rustle, as if the mountains themselves leaned in to listen. Lissa's heart clenched, the instinctive bond warring with the sting of her past. Freedom whispered of the wilds beyond, where no alpha's decree could chain her, no pack's lies could wound. Yet the visions lingered, flames licking the Iron Fang halls, kin turning blade on kin under the Blight's influence, Ilara's sharp smile twisting into something feral. She rose unsteadily, the mantle slipping from her shoulders like a shed skin, its warmth relinquished as resolve hardened in her chest. "Answers?" she echoed, her voice a thread of steel woven through vulnerability, the poetic cadence of her thoughts spilling into words. "They cast me out as a traitor. What forgiveness do I owe a pack that chose fear over truth?" The question was her own judgment, introspection coiling like smoke from the embers. Strength was not blind loyalty, but the mercy to confront the wounds that birthed it. The moon's light caught the scar at her throat, silvering it like a crescent promise, urging her toward the trial she could no longer evade. Dawn's first pallor bled into the sky as they broke from the hollow, Kaelin's stallion bearing them both through the thinning snowfields, his guards flanking like silent wraiths. The air hummed with tension, the wind carrying the acrid scent of smoke from distant borders, harbingers of the confrontation brewing. Lisa clung to him. Not in surrender, but necessity, her body pressed against the unyielding warmth of his chest, each jolt of the horse's gait amplifying the visceral rhythm of his heartbeat. Rationalization frayed at the edges. This was no mere alliance, but a tether forged in blood and moonlight, resisted yet blooming like a rose through frost. The mountains parted to reveal the Iron Fang's outer watchtowers, jagged spires of ice-crusted stone that loomed like accusatory fingers. Howls split the morning mist, not triumphant, but fractured, laced with the blight's dissonant edge. The pack had come, summoned by rumors of the king's return and the exiles' shadow. They met at the frost-rimed crossroads, a wide basin where the river's frozen veins snaked through the earth, the ground scarred by recent skirmishes. Ilara stood at the forefront, her lithe form cloaked in silver fox, eyes gleaming with a mix of triumph and desperation, the blight's tendrils already darkening the whites around her irises. Flanking her were beta enforcers, their armor dented and bloodied from Stormclaw probes, and behind them, the alpha rival himself, Thorn of the Stormclaw, a hulking figure with furred pauldrons and a maw of scars, his presence a thunderhead of ambition. He had exploited the Iron Fang's fractures, whispering alliances to Ilara in exchange for Lissa's head, seeing her unnatural gifts as a threat to his conquest. The air thickened with scents, fear sweat, iron resolve, and the coppery undercurrent of impending violence. Kalen dismounted, drawing Lisa down with a protective arm, his body a barrier as the packs converged, Weavos rising in a cacophony that shook the snow from the pines. "You return with the traitor!" Ilara spat, her voice honey-laced with venom, stepping forward as if to reclaim her weave of lies. The crowd murmured, eyes on Lissa, judgmental, wary, the same gazes that had sealed her fate. Thorn laughed, a guttural bark that echoed off the crags, his claws flexing. "The king rides for scraps while his borders bleed. Hand her over, Drake, and spare your pack the war I've already won." The words ignited the basin, blades hissing from sheaths, the air electric with the promise of blood. Lissa's vision surged, the Pathfinder's sight piercing the fray, threads of shadow coiling around Ilara, twisting her jealousy into the Blight's tool while Thorn's ambition fed its hunger. She could end it, guide Kalen to the temple, purify the darkness with her blood. But at what cost? Freedom meant walking away, letting the packs devour themselves in their wars of pride. Love, or whatever fragile bloom stirred in her chest, demanded forgiveness, not absolution for betrayers, but the mercy to heal the broken whole. Kalen stepped forward, sword half-drawn, his voice cutting through the din like a clarion. "She is no traitor. Your whispers, Ilara, your ambition, fed this poison." Guilt flashed in his eyes, the melancholy king confronting his past decree, but his ethic held firm. War served no redemption. Thorn lunged, a whirlwind of fury, clashing against Kalen's blade in a spray of sparks that lit the snow like falling stars. The packs erupted, bodies colliding in visceral chaos, fists on flesh, blood arcing hot against the cold, the river's ice cracking under stamping boots. Lisa backed away, heart pounding, the locket's symbol burning in her mind, a drop of blood to mend, not spill. Ilara circled her, knife glinting. Her face contorted. "You were nothing, an omega with delusions. I did what was needed." The strike came swift, but Lissa's gift flared, shadows parting to reveal the path. She sidestepped, disarming with a healer's precision, pinning Ilara with a gaze that stripped away the lies. "Mercy isn't weakness," Lissa whispered, voice steady amid the fray. The moral choice crystallizing. Forgive the traitor, guide the packs to unity, or claim her liberty and solitude. Kalen dispatched Thorn with a blow that sent the rival sprawling, bloodied but spared a killing thrust, his ethic prevailing over vengeance. The clash ebbed as the blight's illusion shattered under the moon's lingering gaze, Pax halting in confusion, sense of kin overriding the shadow's discord. Alara knelt, defeated, her eyes clearing as Lissa's light touched her. Forgiveness offered, not as erasure, but as the forge for rebirth. Yet Lissa trembled, the dilemma spiritual and raw. Bind herself to this king, to love as redemption's proof, or sever the bond for the freedom of the untethered wilds. The basin fell silent, breaths heaving, blood steaming on the snow like the locket's eternal drop, a poignant emblem of choices etched in crimson. Kaelin's hand found hers amid the wreckage, his touch a question, the weight of war and pardon hanging between them like the moon's unyielding light. What was true strength, if not the heart's verdict in the face of such tragedy? The basin's frozen silence stretched like a held breath, the moon's silver gaze bathing the bloodied snow in a hush of judgment and grace. Lissa stood amid the wreckage of the confrontation, her hand still clasped in Kaelin's, the warmth of his scarred palm a lifeline she both craved and feared. The air hung heavy with the sense of iron and exertion, sweat-slicked fur, the sharp tang of torn flesh, and the underlying rot of the blight that had twisted loyalties into fangs. Ilara knelt before her, defeated, her once sharp eyes now dulled by the clearing shadows, the venom of jealousy purged by the faint glow of Lysa's gift. The Pax encircled them, Ironfang and Stormclaw alike, their howls silenced into ragged breaths, bodies heaving from the fray. Thorn lay sprawled nearby, his massive form rising slowly, blood matting his fur, but spared by Kaelin's mercy, a blow that humbled rather than killed, echoing the ethical core of the king who had learned too late the cost of haste. Lysa's heart thundered, a visceral drum against her ribs, the scar at her throat pulsing like a second heartbeat. The locket's phantom weight pressed there, its shattered crescent and blood-red drop reborn in the crimson stains at her feet, symbols weaving through the chaos like threads of fate. Her visions had parted the veil, revealing the blight not as an enemy to conquer with blades, but a wound in the Deus's weave, born of broken bonds, fed by Alpha's unyielding pride and Omega's silenced voices. She could heal it, her Pathfinder blood the key, a pilgrimage to the lunar temple, where under the full moon's fire she would offer a drop of her essence, mingling it with the sacred flames to cleanse the Pack's souls. But the choice loomed, raw and unyielding. Sacrifice her freedom for this union, bind her gift to Kaelin's redemption, or walk into the wilds alone, letting the shadows claim what they would. Love was no glittering prize. It was the forge of rebirth, demanding she surrender the isolation that had armored her heart. Kaelin turned to her, his storm-gray eyes reflecting the moon's pallor, melancholy etched deeper now, as if the night's trials had stripped him bare. Guilt clung to him like frost on his armor. The weight of his past decree, the banishment that had nearly cost her life, mirrored in the way he held her hand, tentative, reverent. "The temple calls," he murmured, voice a low rumble that cut through the basin's hush, carrying the philosophical ache of a king who had ruled with iron but yearned for compassion's light. "Your sight has shown the path, Lissa, but I will not chain you to it. The Pax. They fracture without this cure, but your liberty is the true sovereignty." His words were a vow, ethical and broken, the melancholy king offering her the choice he himself had denied in his haste. Up close, his scent enveloped her, pine smoke and resolved blood, stirring the instinctive pull that had simmered since the storm, now blooming into something profound, resisted no longer by rational walls, but tested by the spirit's fire. She pulled away gently, stepping into the moonlit center of the basin, the snow crunching under her boots like fragile oaths giving way. The Pax watched, their forms shadows in the lunar glow, enforcers with lowered blades, Alara rising unsteadily, her face a mask of dawning remorse. Thorn's amber eyes flickering with reluctant awe. The wind stirred, carrying distant weavos that mourned the old ways, while the river's ice groaned beneath, a subterranean whisper of the earth's unrest. Lissa closed her eyes, introspection flooding her like the cold's deep seep. Rejection had been her exile, but rebirth demanded more than survival. It required the mercy to heal those who had wounded her, to choose love as proof of her strength, not its reward. The visions returned, softer now, silver threads guiding to the temple's hidden spire, where flames awaited her blood. Yet freedom sang in her veins, the wild mountains promising solitude's quiet sovereignty, unburdened by kings or curses. Her gift flared once more, unbidden, a blue luminescence blooming from her palms, tracing luminous paths in the air, crescents arching over the packs, drops of ethereal red falling to mingle with the snow's stains. Gasps rippled through the assembly, the blight recoiling like smoke before dawn, its shadows fraying at the edges. Lissa felt the pull toward Kaelin intensify, a visceral tether that warmed her core against the night's bite, his presence a steady flame in the periphery. He had ridden through the storm for her, shielded her in the hollow, confronted his guilt in the basin's blood, ethical, melancholic, a king marked by duty's thorns. The bond was no illusion. It was destiny's revelation, urging union not as conquest, but as mutual cure. Yet the dilemma tore at her soul, sacrifice the self for the whole, pour her blood into the temple's fire to rebirth the packs or sever the tie, claiming the liberty of an Omega unbound? The moon crested higher, its light pooling in the basin like molten silver, illuminating the choice's poetry. Lissa opened her eyes, meeting Kaelin's gaze across the frozen expanse. The distance between them, a chasm bridged by shared wounds. "Strength is not in power's grasp," she whispered, her voice carrying on the wind, philosophical and intimate, a mantra born of the night's tragedy. "It is in the mercy to yield, for healing, for union, for the light that redeems us all." Tears traced her cheeks, freezing into crystal paths as she stepped forward, her hand extending not in submission, but alliance. The packs stirred, hope flickering in their eyes, the locket symbol alive in this moment, a drop of blood to mend the fractured moon. Kaelin closed the gap, his fingers intertwining with hers, the touch electric, a spark that ignited the air between them. No words passed, only the profound silence of acceptance, the king's melancholy lifting like mist before sun, his guilt transmuted into resolve. They turned as one toward the eastern crags, the packs falling in behind, a procession forged in snow and blood. The temple awaited, its fires a beacon under the Diusa's watch, where sacrifice would birth union, curing the blight through love's redemptive proof. Lissa's heart swelled, the rebirth not effortless, but earned, a tender tragedy yielding to epic grace, the wind's howl now a chorus of renewal. Yet as they crested the first ridge, the shadows lingered at the edges, whispering of trials yet to unfold, the choices echo a spiritual vow etched in the moon's unblinking eye. What was destiny, if not the freedom to embrace it, wounds and all? If your heart beat alongside ours, like, comment, and subscribe. Because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive. The moon's arc traced a slow descent toward the eastern crags, its silver veil thinning as dawn's first blush bled into the horizon, painting the snow in hues of rose and ash. Lissa walked at Kaelin's side through the winding path, her hand still entwined with his, the touch a quiet anchor amid the procession's solemn tread. The packs followed in uneasy unity, Iron Fang betas with their iron-ringed cloaks, Stormclaw warriors bearing the scars of reluctant truce, their breaths mingling in white plumes that rose like offerings to the Diusa. The air hummed with the scent of thawing frost and lingering blood, the basin's crimson stains now distant echoes, frozen into the earth's memory. Yet the locket's symbol, pulsed in Lissa's veins, that eternal drop of red against the crescent's curve, a reminder that healing demanded not just sight, but surrender, a drop of her essence to quench the blight's devouring thirst. Her steps faltered on the uneven stone, the weight of the choice settling like the mountain's unyielding shadow. The temple loomed ahead, its spires jagged silhouettes against the paling sky, carved from ice-veined rock and etched with ancient lunar runes that glowed faintly as if the Deusa herself had breathed life into the stone. Visions had guided them here, silver threads unraveling the blight's coils, revealing chambers where sacred flames burned eternal, fed by the blood of pathfinders who had forged bonds across fractured packs. Lissa's gift thrummed beneath her skin, the pathfinder's light a warm current now, no longer the erratic flare of revelation, but a steady call to sacrifice. Freedom had tempted her in the basin's hush, the wild winds beyond the crags, where no king's vow or pack's demand could bind her spirit. Yet love, that resisted bloom, whispered of deeper liberty, the union that mended not just wounds, but the very weave of destiny. Kaelin sensed her hesitation, his grip tightening imperceptibly, not in possession, but shared resolve. His melancholy lingered in the lines of his face, etched deeper by the night's trials. The ethical king who had confronted his guilt in the bloodied crossroads now facing the final forge. "The flames await," he murmured, his voice a low cadence that wove through the wind's soft moan, carrying the philosophical ache of one who had learned redemption's cost. "But if your heart bids you turn back—" He trailed off, gray eyes meeting hers, haunted yet luminous, reflecting the moon's fading glow. Guilt had been his shadow since the storm's ride, the hasty banishment a blade he could not unsheathe from his soul. Now, in this pilgrimage, he offered her the choice he had denied: walk free, or bind their fates in the temple's fire, his love no crown to claim, but a proof of mercy's quiet power. The procession halted at the temple's threshold, a vast archway flanked by pillars that wept frozen tears, the air inside thick with the scent of ancient incense and smoldering embers. Lissa stepped forward alone, the packs forming a silent ring beyond the veil, their forms blurred by rising mist. The interior unfolded like a dream carved from ice and flame, walls veined with quartz that caught the inner light, converging on a central altar where a basin of silver cradled a fire that burned without fuel, its hues shifting from blue to crimson, mirroring the locket's lost emblem. The blight's presence lingered here, a subtle rot in the air, shadows flickering at the edges like whispers of betrayal. Ilara's jealousy, Thorn's ambition, Kaelin's own flawed decrees, all threads in the darkness she alone could sever. She approached the basin, her breath shallow, the scar at her throat igniting with a heat that spread through her chest like liquid fire. Introspection coiled within. Rejection had stripped her bare. Exile a crucible that forged this gift from despair's depths. What was rebirth, if not the will to pour one's essence into the void, to choose compassion over the solitude of the untamed wilds? Her fingers trembled as she drew a ritual blade from the altar's edge, its hilt etched with crescents, the metal cold as the snows she had wandered. The pack's eyes bored into her back, hopeful, wary, the weight of their fractured unity pressing like the wind's invisible hand. Kaelin stood closest, his presence a steady warmth at the threshold, the instinctive bond now a visceral tide, pulling her not into chains, but into the poetry of mutual healing. With a steadying breath, Lissa pressed the blade to her palm, the cut swift and precise, blood welling in a rich drop that caught the fire's gleam. It mirrored the locket's enamel perfectly, red as life's fierce pulse, against the silver of her skin. She extended her hand over the basin, the droplet falling with deliberate grace, hissing as it met the flames. The fire roared upward, a visceral eruption of light and heat that chased the shadows from the chamber, the blight recoiling in tendrils of smoke that dissolved into harmless mist. Visions cascaded through her. Packs reunited under the moon's benevolent eye. Borders redrawn not in blood, but bonds. Ilara's remorse blooming into quiet service. Thorn's pride tempered by the Deuce's grace. The cure spread, a spiritual wave that mended the soul's fractures, Kaelin's guilt lifting like fog before the sun, his melancholy transmuted into serene resolve. Pain lanced through her, sharp and redemptive. The sacrifice drawing a gasp from her lips as strength ebbed, her knees buckling. Kaelin was there in an instant, catching her against his chest, his arms a cradle of unyielding warmth amid the temple's echoing hush. The bond sealed then, not in words or oaths, but in the shared rhythm of their breaths, the fire's glow illuminating the union forged from suffering's forge. Lissa leaned into him, resistance yielding to acceptance, the love that had simmered in denial now a flame that warmed without consuming. It was no reward, this tenderness born of tragedy. It was proof, the ethical choice to heal, to rebirth not just the packs, but the wounds that had defined them. The moon slipped below the peaks, yielding to dawn's golden light that filtered through the archway, bathing them in renewal's embrace. Outside, the packs knelt as one, Weavos rising in a harmonious chorus that shook the crags, the wind carrying their song across the mountains like a vow renewed. Lisa's eyes met Kaelin's, the gray depths now clear, reflecting her own quiet strength. The locket's symbol lived on, etched in their joined hands, a drop of blood that had mended the crescent's break. In that moment, under the Deuce's watchful fade, Renascimento bloomed, not as epic triumph, but as the profound mercy of souls entwined, destiny claimed through love's unyielding proof. The wilds whispered beyond, but here, in union's tender hold, freedom found its truest form. If your heart beat alongside ours, like, comment, and subscribe, because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive.